Thank you, everybody, for coming to our webinar today about globally rare, locally hidden, how to save habitats before paving them over. I'm Renee Grebe. I'm the Northern Virginia Conservation Advocate for Nature Forward. I'm one of just multiple co-sponsors of this webinar tonight, and I wanted to have all of our partners have a chance to introduce themselves as well.
I'm Betsy Martin, and I'm on the board of the Northern Virginia Bird Alliance and also with the Friends of Little Hunting Creek.
I'm Philip Latassa, longtime volunteer with the Friends of Acton Creek.
Hi, Ann Bennett, and I'm with the Great Falls Group of Sierra Club.
Good evening. I'm Alan Ford. I'm the president of the Potomac chapter of the Virginia Native Plant Society.
All of these great co-sponsors are going to be helping to monitor the chat and the Q&A and such. So I'm sure you'll hear from them later as well. We appreciate you coming tonight to learn about two related topics: the proposed Cinder Bed Road Bikeway proposal and the special place that it's proposed to be located, a special piece of land called the Newington Conservation Area. So we'll talk about these two things, sometimes interchangeably, but one is the project and one is the land. We have about 35 minutes of content for you, and then we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. This is a webinar format just because we had so many RSVPs. So please use the Q&A format, which comes with the webinar. That's separate from the chat box. If you put something in the chat box, it goes away pretty quickly, and sometimes we might miss it. So the Q&A functionality allows that to be a bit more organized. It should be one of the buttons on the bottom of your Zoom. So if you can use that, that's preferable. And I think through that functionality, you should be able to upvote other people's questions as well. So I know this topic is a pretty challenging one, and we spent a lot of time over the multiple years thinking about this topic and knowing how challenging it can be to talk about. So I just wanted to put some group norms out there for all of us to keep in mind as we go through the slides, as you consider what to put in the chat box, and as you ask questions in the Q&A. Please treat people with dignity and respect. Let's practice active listening, no matter whose perspective is being put forth. It's always helpful to learn from others. In that vein, be open to ideas and suggestions. If you're asking a lot of questions, maybe just step back a little bit. If you're being quiet, feel free to step up a little bit with your question and be respectful of time. We'll probably just be reading the Q&A questions, so that might not be as relevant, but be respectful of us trying to get through this and trying to also address everybody's questions. So with that, we'll dive right in. As we face the impacts of climate change, now more than ever, we really need to protect the precious few green corridors, woods, wetlands, and natural areas that we have left in Fairfax County, and really across the state and country. And the area that you're going to be learning about tonight isn't just a green corridor. It's a globally rare habitat found only in a few other places on the East Coast. So it's located here in the southern part of Fairfax County, just south of the Franconia-Springfield Metro. And it's called the Newington Conservation Area. It's a natural area that's gone pretty unnoticed for quite a long time prior to this project proposal. And that was kind of by design, which we'll talk about. It's the backyard forest of an HOA community where people have been enjoying dirt paths in a forest along stream beds for decades, not maybe really knowing the full extent of the ecological gem that was there. But several years ago, the coalition of co-sponsors on this webinar learned about this area because of the bikeway proposal that, if built, would have significant and devastating effects to the habitat as it exists today. So we all came together, this coalition of co-sponsors, in 2021 when we learned about the details of the Cinder Bed Road Bikeway proposal. And that, again, that's the name of the project that's revealed the Newington Conservation Site to us. And since that time, we've attended the single public meeting that was held on the project. We've combed over the project details, including environmental assessments. We've met numerous times with elected officials and/or staff to discuss this project. But we're presenting this project tonight because through all of the work we've done over the past 4 years, it seems that little has changed for the proposal in the face of an incredible amount of information about the unique challenges being faced at this site. And so we need your help, and we're asking for more voices to speak up to protect and save this special area. To learn about the Newington Conservation Area and its threats, we're going to take a step back and learn about the proposal that's putting it at risk. So the proposed Cinder Bed Road Bikeway stands out as especially fraught due to its environmental impacts, the lack of protection of globally rare habitats from those impacts, and the planning process which led to its adoption without prior environmental assessment of the area. So putting aside the Newington Conservation Site for just a moment and looking at the proposal, this bikeway proposal was approved in 2014, so a long time ago. It became a line on a map. And by the end of 2016, there was a report published on the bikeway proposal. And the stated purpose of the bikeway is to connect the trail system to the metro from the Fairfax County Parkway about 3 miles to the south. And generally, all of our organizations on this call support that goal. Connectivity to the metro is one of the best ways to encourage car alternative transportation methods like biking, using scooters for those last mile connections. And obviously, these kinds of paths are wonderful for recreation as well. But that red line, it generally follows the road called Cinder Bed Road, where there's a sidewalk for about half the length of the road. And then the road eventually dead ends into a park, which does have a current path in it. It's right by that segment of green on the map in the middle there. And what we're going to be talking about today is segment 6. This is not yet built at all. It's the part that we're most concerned about for the irreversible environmental damage that would be caused by the trail. So in good news, the red line that you see here is not the only possible trail connection available in this area to get people to the metro. There are a myriad of other options in the area, and looking kind of holistically at the infrastructure, we can see that if you want to get from Fort Belvoir or other areas to the south, you can get up to the metro, no problem. There are places in the county that have no trails, right? This is not one of them. When these communities were built out, they got a lot of things right about integrating active transportation structures into the plans. And while there are absolutely opportunities for improvement and maintenance, the base infrastructure is to be celebrated and commended. And in fact, I think the bikeway proposal is unique for this reason. There are alternatives, and we should celebrate those alternatives. So given both our concerns and the extensive active transportation infrastructure already existing in and around the area, the environmental damage this new proposal will create, we were surprised to hear in the county that there wasn't a demand study done for this proposal because there's already a lot of infrastructure. So as the county pursued this 0.7 of a mile of segment 6, it required significant alterations from that original 2014 proposal where it was just a line on the map. The costs have ballooned due to the requirement of 2 major bridges that are attempting to build over the sensitive wetlands and rare habitat. So as we look at segment 6 on this map, we see that green area to the south, which is a Fairfax County Park, but that map area of segment 6 up there, that white empty area, it's, looking at aerial footage, we can see that it's actually very, very green. So what we see in segment 6 is a fully forested area. And what we found on the ground is that it's far more than just a forested area, which we'll dive into in a few moments. So looking at this view on the map, it's important to note that the area here is already fragmented by a major rail line on that west side, by heavy development upstream and to the east, and with lots of impervious surfaces and impacts on all sides, not to mention power lines and sewer lines running through the natural area here as well. So often these remnant stream valleys face just continued threats, and they're the path of least resistance for things like power lines, sewer lines, bikeways, and they often suffer death by 1,000 cuts. And yet somehow this special habitat has survived, almost pristine on its interior, which is really exciting. So to give you an overall sense of the built environment in this immediate area, we can look at these maps. The colors represent who owns some of the key parts of the land. The blues are owned by railways and metro. The greens are owned by either the Park Authority, FCPA, or the Board of Supervisors, BOS. And then the yellow is owned by Amberley HOA. So this is Beulah, for any of you that are familiar with this area. That's kind of a main road through this area. It's a 4-lane road. They do have bike lanes. They are painted but not separated. The black lines here are the existing paths that exist today. It terminates at the Island Creek community up here, so it kind of dead ends that new community that was built in that white square area. But if you go up the map, you get over here to Amberley Park, which is a Fairfax County park property, has a nice path through it. And then Crestley Way is a road through the Amberley HOA, which is quite approachable in terms of being able to ride a bike or walk on the sidewalks. Then there's a bike ped connection owned by the Board of Supervisors. It gets you down onto Berry Road, and Berry Road connects you to the metro. So that's kind of what's there today in the communities in this direct vicinity. The red dash line here is the segment 6 that's proposed to be built. And on a map, it looks good, looks totally logical, right? You just connect to the metro. But the one thing that's not really obvious here is that the topography here offers a natural separation of the stream valley, where there are not people, and the built areas where there are people. And the black line that currently follows the stream is flat and is relatively lower, but it's away from where people live. So the people are up kind of on the hillside where Island Creek is up there and Crestley Way is. And the people that are there, they're able to get to the metro because they just go downhill. There isn't really a way for them to go down into the forest to get there. So the people that live closest to the metro, that 15-minute walkable community, they're mostly already connected. And I think it's important to note that what was invisible to the planners is also invisible on this map. It's the Newington Conservation Site. It engulfs almost the entire area that we're looking at here. That's the black circle. That's roughly the area of it. And so what is a conservation site? We learned about it through the proposal. It's an area mapped by the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation around one or more rare plant, animal, natural communities. And they're mapped to include those plants or that specific element, and where possible, their associated habitat with enough buffer to ensure the element's conservation. So the natural heritage resource of concern at this site are the many acidic seepage swamps, a special globally rare type of wetland that exists here. And one of those seepage swamps is located in and around the area to the very north of this proposal. This is roughly the general area of it. And when segment 6 was a line drawn on a map in 2014, no one knew it was there. The trail planning process that allowed this kind of backwards planning to take place, it's the process that kind of surfaces it. 3 of the process concerns we identified through the research of this project include that there was no upfront environmental assessment designated for projects. And these globally rare habitats, these kinds of areas that are special, they are hidden on purpose from public view as a way to protect them. But that's kind of a catch-22. How do you protect what you don't know about? So the only time that they're revealed is once a project has been proposed. So 2, trails such as this are considered passive recreation, and thus they are exempt from environmental regulations that aim to usually protect stream valleys from development. And then 3, once a project area was fully funded, that's when they did the cursory environmental review. So that means the money is already there. The project is very hard to change at that point. And for this project, the environmental review consisted of identifying what was there, missing quite a bit of what was there, as we found out later, designating mitigation measures, but not really avoiding building through this area based on what they found of a globally rare habitat. So because of this, and because of the way the process works, the original cost was only $5 million, but when that extent of the wetlands was discovered, it necessitated big changes. And by 2021, the costs had ballooned to almost $15 million with the need for those 2 bridges we talked about. As of this year, the costs are up to $18 million. That's a 350% increase since it was first imagined as a line on the map. So why would we spend $18 million or more when we have alternatives? And is this the best return on investment given the impacts, the costs, particularly as we face a challenging budget situation? So because it's difficult to get in this area and it could be damaging if we all did, we wanted to give you a quick little tour through some pictures. The map on the left-hand side, you can follow the red dot for where these pictures were generally taken, so you can see where we are. This is the existing path that is built in that green area in the Fairfax County Park area. It's 8 feet wide. It's no lights there, but it's built. It's what's there. It's quite nice. And this is right where the path dead ends. That's essentially the border of the HOA property. The enclave is that white square. It's another small HOA. And it was kind of interesting when we came here to do a site visit in 2022, the construction silt fences, you can see, are still up. And the signs dotting the area said it was a tree preservation area, no entry allowed. So we know they knew it was special as well. So today up in the Amberley HOA property, you'll find a ton of low impact natural surface trails like this one that are a compatible use with this sensitive habitat. They don't go into the sensitive habitat because that's all wetlands on the other side. But the reason for the Newington Conservation Site really is this special habitat, the acidic seepage swamps. It's not a very sexy name, but it's an important habitat. It's so unique to this region, like I hinted at earlier. Geologically speaking, this habitat can only exist where the coastal plain meets the Piedmont. They are two geological regions in our area. And where those geological regions meet is called the fall line. And this area is characterized by a substantial layer of semi-consolidated gravel deposited near the end of the last glacial period around 15,000 years ago. And this gravel layer leads to the important hydrology of the area by providing slow, constant moisture to the extensive wetlands along the stream valley. So what defines an acidic seepage swamp? Well, it's defined primarily by two kinds of things: the specific hydrology, how that water flows, and then the community of plants that live there because of that hydrology. And these are the two very things that would be damaged if this segment were to be built. And we suspected that important habitat was there. And upon researching the project and reviewing the cursory environmental review documents, we saw this letter from the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation. It states that natural heritage resources are defined as habitat of rare, threatened, or endangered plant and animal species, unique or exemplary natural communities. And this letter directly addressed the Newington Conservation Site, and it lays out the specific type of threatened habitat that's been mapped there. So we went to go look up what that meant as well. And they use, Virginia uses NatureServe as their kind of reference material. It's a national nonprofit that provides comprehensive data to the public for strategic conservation efforts. And this data, like I said, was mentioned in the letter. We can see that their website here clearly lays out what is defined by this habitat. So it's all of these different species here, which we're going to see pictures of soon. It's an acidic seepage swamp, so the name, all of those plants together form this kind of named habitat. And it's classified as G3 vulnerable, where a G stands for global. It's globally rare. So what does it actually look like? Well, to an untrained eye, certainly to me before I learned about this area, it looked like a wetland area, very, very soggy. And that's how it generally showed up as well in the environmental review. It was a wetland. But to the trained eye, you begin to recognize some of the residents of this special habitat, like this sweet bay magnolia that's arching across the picture there, or possum haw, one of the keystone plants, according to NatureServe, cinnamon fern, skunk cabbage, which is a wonderful wetland plant as well. And it's really the collection of all of these kinds of plants and features, all living within that hydrology, that creates the acidic seepage swamps based on that location along the fall line that make this special. The hydrology is what can be destroyed by building a trail here, and it can't be mitigated. You can't pick up this rare habitat and move it somewhere else. It needs these conditions to exist. And the kicker is that the Newington Conservation Area is of higher quality than anything else like this in the county. These kinds of pictures, if you know invasive plants, they're hard to find in these pictures, and that's really a gift. So in the case of Cinder Bed, we believe this habitat in question was far greater than the report showed. We had some knowledgeable partners that believe this and talked us through it. And in the spring of 2023, the Department of Conservation and Recreation came back out to survey the site and found that, in fact, the seepage swamp was not the 5 acres shown in the 2016 report, but rather more than double at over 10 acres. And so the environmental review that was done as part of the planning hadn't appropriately revealed what was there. But legal protections from environmental harms caused by trails, they're nearly non-existent because of passive recreation facilities, including bike trails, are exempt from the provisions of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. And in this case, protections that might have come from NEPA, from the National Environmental Policy Act, they were all waived through receiving a categorical exclusion, which is a way around additional environmental review. So what are the risks to seepage swamps if we build segment 6? There's a real risk of changing the hydrology, of changing the way that water seeps through all of those gravel layers that form the site and flow across the land in a way that destroys that habitat. We found this description interesting from the National Park Service. It's a brochure on magnolia bogs. They are not the same. Magnolia bogs are far more endangered, but they're a pretty close relative. They share many of the same plants. Magnolia bogs have even more diversity, and they share similar needs for hydrology. And I found it really impressive that the DC ended up tunneling under the magnolia bog to avoid it. That's incredibly expensive, so that they could get what they needed out of the project, but still save the magnolia bog. So like I said, these are not the exact same habitats, but it's an interesting story of what could be done to save globally rare habitats. And then, as with any construction, roads, homes, anything, this kind of disturbance acts as a way to bring in invasive plants on the tires of construction equipment, on the shoes of users on the trail eventually. They're just all further encouraged by the sunlight into an area that happens when you open up a forest like that. These invasive plants have already, are putting this community at risk, but it could, a trail bisecting this could absolutely significantly increase that risk. And this is especially unfortunate because this area, like I mentioned, is far more healthy than many of our suburban forests. So keeping that intact is one of the things that's keeping it as healthy as it is. This is a photo from the northernmost part of the trail along the railroad closer to the metro station, and it shows an incredible coverage of invasive vines already taking over the area where the power line cuts have removed trees. And they provided that in for those plants to take hold. I know a lot of you have seen this other places in the county, but we know it's on the doorstep of this area as well. In addition to the risk of changing the hydrology of the community, is the broader issue of just habitat alteration, particularly given that this area houses such unique and vulnerable habitat type. So we just mentioned invasive plants, but I wanted to use a different analogy to kind of explain what I mean by habitat alteration, because it might not be just invasive plants. It's just the change of cutting a path through a forest. I heard this helpful analogy from Jay Cole. She's the ecologist who directs the Fairfax County Park Authority. And she was describing habitat fragmentation in general, nothing to do with this project, but this really resonated with me when I heard it. I think it applies to the site as well. Each of us understands resources in different ways. If you think about something like an athletic field, you know what a soccer field means, right? It's perfect for a game. You have certain distances that you need. But if we built a road through that soccer field, no matter how much builders might say they could minimize or remediate the damage, it just wouldn't function the same way. And so that's really what's happening in this area as well, if segment 6 were to be built. Any development, not just bike paths, can bisect and fragment habitats. Buildings can do this, roads can do this. And this is the kind of impact we'd expect to see from the Cinder Bed Road Bikeway. This is a photo from the Cross County Trail as it was being built a number of years ago. This is the road through a soccer field analogy right here. That forest won't function the same way that it used to. And we get a sense from this photo and the tracks in the mud that the area being cleared is as wide as a road, right? It's big. 10 feet is the proposed width, but it's also going to have the potential to include up to a 30-foot wide clearing for the easements that they might need. So a significant number of trees could be removed, will be, and could be removed if it was built. So where we had a healthy functioning fragment of forest left, we opened it up to more sunlight, allow invasive seeds to take hold, and habitat degradation follows. And invasive plants, once they get their in via disturbance like this, they are incredibly difficult and also incredibly expensive to control over the long term. Impacts at the Cross County Trail, as they would be at Cinder Bed, also extend beyond the trail itself. To build bridges, and in that project and in Cinder Bed, you need a temporary staging area, and it's required to pile the construction materials and store the equipment. And so those impacts are classified as temporary, but we all know how long it takes for trees to regrow, not to mention the compaction of the soil. Those temporary impacts are felt for decades or centuries in this globally rare habitat. So in addition to changing the contiguous nature of the forest canopy, which in and of itself changes how habitats function, the construction work again opens up the forest to more sunlight, invasive plants, encroaching into the forest and the seepage swamp habitat itself over time. And acknowledging how impactful the stream crossings can be, the county has proposed to utilize a construction mitigation strategy called a French mattress. That sounds fluffy and lovely, but this is a photo of what a French mattress looks like. It gives you an idea of the heavy equipment and the hardscape that's required for this mitigation approach that's reportedly a better option. You can note the size of the excavator and backhoe needed for that excavation to spread stone like this after dumping, and the trucks needed to import that clean stone and haul away excavated materials, as well as the grader and sometimes compactors. But as we said, the Newington Conservation Site, it's more than just a forest. It's a vulnerable and rare habitat, currently quite well preserved, with a plan to build a 10-foot wide paved lit path, roughly the size of a road, through the middle of it. Another concern will be the lights. You may be familiar with dark sky lighting, which is great, but we have the added problem here in the Newington Conservation Site. This is a wetland. The animals that live here need this unique habitat, and they need the nighttime to flourish. Lights will be on all night, 7 days a week. The lighting is, the current proposal would severely affect the forest and wetland creatures. There's also discussion of maybe potentially motion sensor lights, but we're apprehensive if that would be better. Lights flashing on all the time with people or animals as they're activating the sensors. So in short, lights just feel like a bad idea here. This artificial night light can affect animals, mammals, reptiles, even plants, can disrupt sleep patterns, can increase stress, increases nighttime activity without corresponding increases in food consumption, and disrupts breeding. In a county as built out as Fairfax, often the most undeveloped lands are in sensitive natural areas, often along streams, and what are designated in Fairfax County as resource protection areas, RPAs. And these areas are designated as buffers to protect water quality, and they're intended to remain vegetated to absorb stormwater runoff. But when these areas become impacted by development, whether it's a road, a highway, a train track, or a bike path, these areas begin to lose their ecological function. RPAs are generally protected from development, but like we mentioned, bike paths are exempted from those same legal protections. They can be built without regard to whether they cause environmental damage. And these effects can be cumulative. Development in the watersheds and demands for trails are continuing. Oftentimes our stream valleys are the path of least resistance. If paths aren't built well the first time, which can be quite costly to do, then we see even more problems like this asphalt being lifted and moved by water. So accessibility and maintenance are not guaranteed when water is involved. And when we build in floodplains, water will carry debris and mud and cover paths, as we see here in Americana Park. And we're facing stronger and more frequent storms we're going to have increased maintenance needs because of those. As an interesting side note, the draft budget from the county for FY26 had proposed to cut the Fairfax County Park Authority trail maintenance funding by $250,000. That would have been 50% of their budget. But I'm happy to report that in today's budget markup, that funding was restored, which is good. But it shows you what a threat it is. It's a struggle to maintain what we have today, let alone build more trails in sensitive areas, which are likely to incur even higher maintenance costs. The stream valley already floods. These are pictures from that Cinder Bed Road area. As shown here, you can see the damage to Newington Road, which is just south of Cinder Bed Road. And you can see the flooding on Cinder Bed Road itself. We know water travels here. The bottom line is that our organizations support trails being built in the right place. And we recognize that the definition of right place is tricky. And we want more and better assessments of environmental impacts before trails are approved. Several of the co-sponsors on this call are members of a network we call Fairfax Healthy Communities. And through that network, we had set up a work group with cycling advocates to talk about the challenges of trail development. We gained a better understanding of each other's points of views, and we continue to work together with the biking community leaders to help make us better advocates for active transportation investments. And if you're a Fairfax County resident, your voice holds weight in this decision. If you're a resident of Franconia District, where segment 6 is located, that's also helpful. And if you're here from outside of Fairfax County, we hope that you can take these lessons with you to your locale, since some of the process concerns that we found throughout this process are related to state and federal regulations as well. So what can you do? First, you can write a letter asking that segment 6 be removed from the Cinder Bed Road Bikeway proposal. We'll drop these links in the chat box. You can scan them. We're going to share the slides later as well. But that's one thing you could do, write to your elected officials. We have a form set up for you at the very bottom of that page. That page has a bunch of information we've covered on it. And then the very, very bottom is a letter writing area that you can do. We're also having a walk there in some of the less sensitive areas there, the surface trails that we saw in the pictures on May 18th. I think it's at 1 o'clock. So if you can come out to that, we have a limit of about 20 people because it's a small area and we like to keep the crowd small enough that we can talk, but you can sign up for that as well. And then keep an eye out for updates. I'm sure all of our organizations will be sending updates as we have them. Your help to save the special place is what we need. There are 3 additional things you can do to support more broadly as well. You can support common sense criteria for responsible active transportation and trail development. So motivated by some of the concerns about harmful impacts from the Cinder Bed Road Bikeway and other local trails, the Northern Virginia Bird Alliance developed a set of recommendations and criteria to apply to decide whether to support or oppose new trail construction. 3 of the 8 NVBA recommendations are aimed to correct what we see as serious flaws in the trail planning process that allow trails to be built in environmentally sensitive areas without sufficient review or public input ahead of time. And this can serve as a model and as a resource for residents that you can point to, asking to have these standards applied to current projects affecting globally rare habitats and to all active transportation projects going forward. You could support the Department of Public Works and Environmental Services memo from March 2025, earlier this year, on trails and resource protection areas. Some environmentally focused county staff, particularly those tasked with the implementation of our community-wide climate action plan and resilient Fairfax policies, they know how important these stream valleys are as well, and they're speaking up. So this past March, they wrote a memo to the Department of Fairfax County's Department of Transportation in conjunction with the Park Authority, asking that hard surface trails should not be shown in RPAs on the county-wide plan unless an environmental assessment has been completed beforehand, and that assessments show de minimis impacts to water quality and sensitive resources. Then lastly, you can advocate for maintaining and improving the current active transportation infrastructure that we have today. We mentioned the initial proposed cuts to the Park Authority budget, but some of the infrastructure in and around the metro is also owned by the Virginia Department of Transportation outside of Fairfax County, and it's not well maintained by the state. We do have photos of that area too, if folks want to see them. But to give you a sense of some of the infrastructure that's directly around these communities today, the one that we kind of showed in the map earlier, we didn't show photos with them. We have some photos just so you can see how someone might traverse this path today to get to the metro. So we've seen this picture before. It's down here at the very start of the Cinder Bed Road Bikeway after the end of the road ends. You go up this path to the east and it takes you up a hill through a power line cut. And that takes you up onto the main road. I think it's Morningstar there. Also quite a lovely shared use path there, quite large. Then you can cut through the HOA there and you can get onto this area, Amberley Park, which follows a power line cut. That takes you over to Crestley Way, which is this sized road, light traffic. It's a HOA community, but it's off the main road, also have sidewalks on each side. And then you can cut down through the connector down to Berry Road. And then Berry Road is pretty walkable as well, right down to the metro, where they do have some biking infrastructure there today. So what comes next? The right-of-way process is already ongoing to acquire properties along the length of the proposed route because this project is much bigger than segment 6. And the right of way will be required in the Newington Conservation Area as well, primarily in the Amberley HOA, but some other properties as well. So we believe eminent domain, that step in the process would be likely in the end of this year or early next year. If the Amberley HOA owners fail to approve an easement granting the right of way, then the Fairfax County Department of Transportation could recommend that the county acquire it via eminent domain. So prior to condemnation, if that's the path they're choosing, the Board of Supervisors would hold a public hearing on the potential condemnation. If the Board of Supervisors votes for it, then the trail will be built. If the Board of Supervisors votes against it, then the county would not be able to obtain the right of way needed to build the trail. So with that, we appreciate your time listening to the information we had, and we're going to move to the Q&A portion of the site. As a reminder, there is Q&A functionality that you can add your questions to. And so we'll transition to that now. Do we have any questions, Betsy, that you want to surface to us?
Well, David points out that forest interior dwelling bird species might also be affected by development of a trail through the middle of the area, which is more of a comment than a question. Noreen asks, would the county consider putting protected bike lanes on the road segment in the photo?
I can answer that in saying that in Fairfax County, we do not own our roads. If you've gone to the city of Alexandria or Arlington County, you'll see the most lovely biking infrastructure. We actually have some photos of that as well. That's because those locales own their own roads, and they have the possibility of making changes at the local level that we do not have in Fairfax County. So it's a good question as to, can we get that? There is at least one protected bike lane that I know of in all of Fairfax County. I've been told, I have not seen it, but I've been told it exists. But that is a decision for the Virginia Department of Transportation, not Fairfax County.
And Margaret Fisher asks, how much longer would it take to bicycle to the metro if the alternative trail is adopted? And I think probably Philip might be the best person to answer that one.
Oh, frankly, it wouldn't take any longer because most of the neighbors around there wouldn't have any access to the Cinder Bed Road Bikeway if it was built. They already have access, as pointed out in our earlier slides, through existing infrastructure, which should be improved. People that would actually benefit, be able to bike to the metro from their neighborhood on the Cinder Bed Road Bikeway is very, very small.
And
I'm sorry, Betsy, just add that there's also a bike, and there's a multi-use trail along 95 as well, along Loisdale, that also takes you to the metro. And, depending on where you are embarking on your, biking and where you're coming from, I think it will just depend. But there are even more opportunities for cyclists and pedestrians on the west side as well. Renee didn't really highlight that as much, but it does exist. So I just thought I would add that.
so Jean asks, is there a draft letter to use in writing to elected officials?
We don't provide a draft. And the reason we don't do that is because elected officials like to hear your words. They like to hear what's important to you. They like to hear a unique perspective. I don't think if you're the kind of person who doesn't like to write, I think you can write something very, very simple. It does not need to be a 20-page document like some of our letters. They get very technical. It need not get to that level of detail. So I'd say write from your heart, write for what's important to you.
And Marla asks, do we really have the possibility of stopping this? That they, Board of Supervisors, move to an alternative plan and forego Section 6, that Board of Supervisors, vote against condemnation. And I guess I can say that in order to get the easement, the county will have to get the approval of the Amberley community, which will have to hold a vote. And it has to be approved by quite a large margin. So it really is going to depend pretty heavily on the HOA that owns this land. And if they vote against it, and if it goes to a public hearing about condemnation, we're not sure what would happen, of course, but it seems like the Board of Supervisors might have thoughts about voting to condemn it. Second thoughts. So Jenny says, are there any bike communities advocating for this segment? And I think the answer is yes. And I think some of them are on the here with us. So they might want to.
We could certainly open up your mic if there's someone from the biking community who wants to speak to this. I'll say from just a general standpoint, it's so hard to get funding for these projects that when you get funding for a project, it's really hard for the biking community to say no to it, right? It's just hard to get these projects built. When you're thinking about what it means to be a biker, if you're commuting to work, even if you're doing it recreationally, you're fighting against life or death on a road. And it's pretty clear in Fairfax County, our bike lanes that are just striped, they're not safe. And so when you're faced with the decision of my safety or comfort, it's a pretty easy choice to say, I would prefer to not die. And I think that's a really helpful perspective that's given me a better understanding of how important it is to make sure our infrastructure is as safe as possible. And opposing bike paths is not something we do at Nature Forward lightly. Globally rare habitat is one of those places where I think we can do better for safety of cyclists without compromising this habitat area. I think we can have both. I think we need to advocate for both so that our cycling companions in the county don't have to make the choice of life or death decisions. But I'm happy to open it up to anyone that might be on the call. Just drop a note in the chat and I should be able to.
Now,
to talk.
Tom Blackburn raises two logistical questions. Is there a time frame within which letters should be written to the Board of Supervisors? And when will the HOA vote? And they do not, to answer the second one first, the HOA does not yet have an offer from the county. And so they will not vote until after that offer is in hand. And I think in terms of the time frame, it's probably good now and later to write to them. What do others say on that point?
I think getting perspectives heard early and often is helpful.
Yeah. And Janice says, in the March 2022 letter, it is suggested a search for small world begonia during the growing season, June 1st to July 29th. But in my experience, it blooms in early to mid-May, not June. Can we get someone out there to see if it's blooming now? I think maybe this is a question for Alan Ford.
Thank you. So we did a survey 2 years ago, specifically looking for the small world begonia. The rationale being, just to be clear, the small world begonia is a species of concern. It is globally threatened, and it would change the equation with regard to how the ground would have to be classified and considered from a development perspective. When we did that search 2 years ago, we found the large whorled begonia, which is a related species but is not threatened. We did not find the small whorled begonia. Part of the challenge is that A, it's a threatened species, so it's not going to announce itself. It's not necessarily going to be easy to find. And B, the place on the ground where we most likely expect to find it is also the most at-risk portion of the Newington Conservation Area. So it's not appropriate, I believe, for non-professionals to go looking for this species in the area where it is most likely to occur. That's why DCR did come out in 2023 and did another assessment. I don't know if they were able to time it so that they were doing that assessment at exactly the right time to find the species.
I'd chime in by saying that another challenge with the small world begonia is that it goes dormant for a number of years. It has that characteristic. So you might not find it for 5 years and then it might pop up again. So we have some added challenges for this. We did get word in April that the environmental assessment company who worked on this before will be out again to look for this plant. But again, in that time frame that's listed, June 1 to July 29. So we appreciate your suggestion to get out there sooner and see if we can find it. That's something we'll certainly be talking about.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. I think to just add, the environmental group organization is only going to be searching for the plant along the proposed bike route. So they're not going to be wandering into the woods to see if it's anywhere there. They're only going to see if it is in a place that would be impacted by their proposed development.
Okay, Jenny asks, who is the bikeway being built for? Anybody want to take that one?
Well, it's a really good question because, as we mentioned in the presentation, there were no demand or usage surveys done. So it's more of a build it and they will come, wishful thinking kind of deal.
Tom Blackburn says, from the discussion of the importance of the HOA vote, it sounds as if the county is already committed to the project. Is that true, or is there a likelihood that the Board of Supervisors will abandon the project? We hope they might. The cost of it keeps going up, and there are budget challenges, and we don't know if the Board of Supervisors will is determined to go through with condemnation if it comes to that. We've gotten sort of mixed messages from various of them that we've talked to. So I don't know if my colleagues have anything to add.
I would say our shared perspective on this call is that segment 6 is the part that we're particularly concerned about. There are certainly impacts along Cinder Bed Road, which will be built along the stream as well. There might be environmental concerns as well, but the shared perspective on this call is for segment 6. So I think abandon the project, from my perspective, is a bit much, but certainly we would be looking for segment 6 to be removed from the project.
Yeah. Yeah, we have not been seeking to abandon the entire Cinder Bed Road Bikeway project, but it has focused on segment 6. Jenny asks, has the additional cost of construction been approved?
Every month, there's a TDD report that comes out, and help me with what that means. Transportation, design, development, I'm not sure, something to that effect. So in Fairfax County, if you Google Fairfax County TDD report, you can see what changes have occurred to the myriad of transportation projects happening around the county. So we keep an eye on that every month. I actually don't know what happens when the number goes up.
Noreen asks, is there any chance if the project goes ahead, they would or could opt for a boardwalk without lighting? I don't know if a boardwalk is less environmentally damaging though. They've designed this bikeway, so they are pretty committed to this project and they're pretty far along, quite far along with the design of it. So I don't think they would rethink the entire design to turn it into a boardwalk, although that's just an opinion. I don't know what they would do. And we don't think that they are willing to do it without lighting. It's intended as a commuter bikeway. So people would be riding on it early in the morning and late in the evening when it's dark. And so we think that they are committed to having it lit.
You can imagine the follow-on concerns of winter maintenance in this area. Hopefully nobody would think to put salt down on a path like this. But the maintenance of that to keep that clear during poor weather months would be interesting as well. There's definitely a lot of questions about exactly how usable that infrastructure will be.
Jean Cadet asks, have you thought about sending a copy of this presentation to the Board of Supervisors? It's an excellent presentation and the information and questions are good for the Board of Supervisors to consider. We've certainly met with them and tried to communicate our concerns with them. And we could certainly make our presentation available to them.
I think we have taken them through versions of this. We've done a walk on site with decision makers as well, with staff as well. We've brought some of these pictures along. We've brought some of these stats along. Might not have done this presentation exactly, but appreciate the suggestion.
And Marla asks, is the funding for this federal, state, or county funding? And the answer is yes. All of the above. So
I see a
are
question.
there other
I see a question from Margaret in the chat box that says, would the alternative add unwelcome lighting in the neighborhoods? Philip, I know you're very familiar with the alternatives. Do you want to take that one?
All the alternatives are already streets in the neighborhoods are already lit. There is an existing path that's going to be incorporated. It's in Island Creek Park that is not lit, but that would be in the park. And we hope, being in the park in the woods, they would forego lighting there. But it should not add any lighting. The alternative path should not add any lighting to the neighborhoods. They are already lit infrastructure.
So that's all the questions I see here. Does anybody else have anything they want to say or comment or other questions?
We appreciate everybody coming out tonight, learning about this. Feel free to pass along the link for the blog post and the area where you can write letters to your friends. And if you have any feedback for us on the presentation, we're all ears. I think this is something that we very much want to get to a good yes for bike infrastructure. And so, we've worked really hard to try to be thoughtful about our decisions for this segment 6.
And I believe we're going to post a recording of this session if you want to tell your friends about it and ask them to learn more about it.
I'll be sure to add it to that blog post that Philip shared in the chat box earlier as well. It'll probably be about a week or so. And David asked, is segment 6 needed to have an end to the trail? We walked through the pictures in the presentation that showed that you can connect today to the metro. It does take you up a hill. It is not totally flat. That's because it's not following the globally rare wetland habitat. So there is connectivity if you are already down in the valley today. And like Philip mentioned, the people are living not in the stream valley. They're living on kind of the hills that are up above the stream valley. And those areas are already connected. So the 15-minute walkable community has connections, except for the enclave, which is a very small 35 houses or so. They would have to come up the hill to go around to the metro. But everybody else is already really connected. And again, there are lots of improvements that could be made. We can show you many paths over on Loisdale Road. It has infrastructure, but it's overgrown, not well maintained. But even over there, they have a bridge that goes across 95, biking infrastructure. There's been a lot of infrastructure, a connector next to, I think it's Franconia Road that takes you over to the metro. There's lots of infrastructure over there, but the maintenance has been a grave concern, as are divided bike lanes, protected bike lanes.
So we have another question from Liz Train. What engagement has occurred with the HOA community? Is there potential opposition to the alternate path if it brings more bike traffic through the neighborhood? Renee, you want to take that one?
Sure. We have reached out to the HOA community. We have been in touch with their board. We have given this presentation to them so they know what asset they have in the community. And I think the general sense that we've gotten from residents in the HOA is that they would not like the path built in the globally rare habitat. I don't want to speak for them, but I think that's the general gist that we've gotten.
Yes, we have had tours. We've had Alan Ford has offered multiple tours to the residents, and quite a few residents have come along and to see the place. And our group has included residents from the Amberley community, some of which are on this webinar tonight. So we, of course, we don't know how the community will vote, and we don't know what the county's offer might look like or how the community will vote. So like Renee said, we can't speak for the community. They will have to speak for themselves, but we certainly are aware of people in the community who do not want this path to go through their rare habitat that they own and have really been quite good stewards of all these years. Now let's see, Walter Nausenberger says, this should be stopped for the benefit of conservation of a rare acidic seepage swamp and globally rare habitat, which is best kept protected for future heritage. Right on, Walter. We agree with you. Whoops, I see there's some more chats too. Here we have an Amberley resident speaking up. Amberley resident here. I oppose Section 6, support improved infrastructure for the biking community, but not this current plan through Section 6 for all the reasons you have wonderfully shared today. Appreciate all this information. Look forward to sharing it with others. Lots of bikers come through our community currently with no problems, Amberley residents included. Just one resident opinion, of course.
I have a question from Gary that says, since this is an ADA compliant trail, do you know the extent of excavation that may occur? Still not identified. It's a pretty flat area. So when we think about grades, when you follow a stream valley, you kind of generally get ADA compliance without much work, at least in our coastal plain area. There has been discussion about what kind of fill might be needed in support of the bridges and the abutments that have to go in with them. But I don't think excavation is something, not any more than you would need to build the infrastructure in and of itself. I don't think. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that.
Maybe the biggest concern is not necessarily fill or excavation, but that the proposed 10-foot wide trail has a 30-foot wide easement, which means that for any reason, for maintenance, for concern about tree fall, the trail management can choose to clear any plants that they don't want within that 30-foot easement. So it's not necessarily the one concern about the excavation, and Renee's presentation pointed out the issue of French drain as a mechanical method to allow the seepage function of the wetland to continue under the trail. That the foundation of the trail would rest upon this porous French drain architecture to mimic the current structure of the water flow. That's their position.
And I would say the definition of a shared use path in Fairfax County is that it requires 3-foot clearing on each side of the trail. So if you've ever been in the GW Parkway Trail down near Mount Vernon, there's really not clearing on the sides of the trail. The vegetation comes right up to the pavement, and it's a little bit more narrow than some of the newer paths. But this path would be not only 10 feet wide, but it would essentially, as a shared use path, require 3 feet on each side. So 10 feet for pavement, and then 6 additional feet of shoulder, not to mention the ability to go up to 30 feet wide. We appreciate everybody's time today. Thanks for coming out on a beautiful spring day to share your time learning about this. The blog post is out there for you in the chat box. The sign up for a walk on May 18th with Alan in this area is available to you as well. And we look forward to keeping in touch. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.